All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to talk about a seriously mind-bending idea, one that connects ancient wisdom with the absolute cutting edge of modern science. It's called non-duality, and you can think of it as a kind of grand unified theory of, well, of you. But before we get into all that, I want to start with a question, a really simple one that gets to the absolute heart of everything. Are you, the person listening to my voice right now, actually separate from the world you see and hear around you? Just let that question sit for a moment, because our entire journey today revolves around it. See, to even start to answer that, we have to look at our own default setting. The way we're all pretty much wired is to see the world as a duality, this illusion of two. I mean, think about your own experience right now. It feels like there's a me in here, behind your eyes, the subject. And then there's everything else out there, the screen you're looking at, the chair you're in, the whole world. It's all just a collection of separate objects. This subject-object split feels totally, completely real, right? It's the assumption we operate on every second of every day without ever questioning it. But what if it's just a deeply ingrained habit of perception? And that's where we get to this ancient and honestly pretty radical idea. Because for thousands of years, all across the globe, different wisdom traditions, often with no contact with each other, all started pointing to the exact same conclusion, a conclusion that shatters our most basic assumption about what reality is. And what's so amazing is just how similar their findings were. You look at Advaita Vedanta in India, and they're talking about Brahman, a single, infinite consciousness that is the only thing that's truly real. Then you jump over to ancient Greece, and you have Neoplatonists talking about the One, a single, absolute unity that everything flows from. Two totally different cultures, thousands of miles and years apart, basically describing the exact same thing. The great sage Adi Shankaracharya summed it up perfectly. The key words here are apparent and not other than. The world appears to be separate, and the individual self is not other than the one single reality. It's a huge hint that our sense of being a little separate person is more like an optical illusion than a hard fact. The best way to get a feel for this is the classic wave and ocean metaphor. When you look at the sea, you see all these individual waves, right? Each one has its own shape, its own size, it seems to live and die on its own. They look completely separate. But what is a wave actually made of? It's just the ocean. It's the water itself, just taking on a temporary shape. And that's the core idea of non-duality. We feel like we're the separate waves, but our true nature, our substance, is the entire ocean. Now, for a long, long time, this was all seen as mysticism, maybe philosophy. But this is where the story gets a really interesting twist. Because in the last few decades, some of our most advanced sciences have started stumbling upon conclusions that sound an awful lot like what those ancient sages were talking about. Here's a modern teacher, Rupert Spira, putting it in plain English. And get this statement isn't just a spiritual belief anymore. It's a legitimate scientific hypothesis being explored by physicists, neuroscientists, and philosophers of mind. Let's see what they're finding. So say hello to a theory called analytic idealism, championed by scientist and philosopher Bernardo Kastrup. It basically flips our usual assumption on its head. Instead of consciousness being something that pops out of a complex brain, it proposes that consciousness is the fundamental stuff of the universe. It's the ground of all being. And our individual minds, we're just like little whirlpools, temporary patterns that form within that one vast stream of consciousness. See, it's the wave and ocean metaphor, but this time with PhDs. This quote from Nisargadatta Maharaj just perfectly captures this radical shift. Our common sense screams that we are this tiny little person inside a massive, sprawling universe. But what if that's backwards? What if the entire universe, everything we see, hear, and touch, is actually taking place inside of consciousness, inside of you? Well, that's almost exactly what cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman is proposing with his interface theory. He argues that evolution did not give us senses to see reality as it truly is. Why? Because that would be way too much information, it would be slow and inefficient. Instead, evolution gave us a simplified user interface. Think of it like the desktop on your computer to help us survive and navigate. So here's how it works. First, the goal of evolution is to keep you alive long enough to reproduce. That's fitness. It couldn't care less about showing you objective truth. Second, to do that, your perception creates this handy desktop with simple icons. Think about the trash can icon on your screen. The icon itself isn't a complex jumble of circuits and code. It's a simple picture that lets you interact with that code easily. And here's the kicker, the punchline. Things like space, time, and physical objects, they aren't the base reality. They are the icons on our species-specific headset. So let's zoom out. What happens when we put all of this together, the ancient wisdom and this crazy new science? We start to get a completely new map of reality, one that's built on 3 fundamental pillars. Pillar number 1, pure awareness is the only real substance. The physical world isn't separate from it. It's just what awareness looks like from a limited point of view. Number 2, that feeling of being a separate me isn't a thing. It's a process. It's a useful pattern, for sure, but it's not who you are at your core. And that leads to pillar number 3. Liberation or awakening isn't about working hard to become something you're not. It's simply about recognizing the truth of what you already are and always have been. Okay, I know this can all sound incredibly abstract, like some far-out philosophy, but the implications of this for our everyday lives are absolutely massive and incredibly practical. So let's bring this down to earth. Why does any of this actually matter? Well, it really all boils down to this number, 0. The number of fundamental, real divisions between you and the universe is 0. Not 1, not a billion. 0. It's one seamless, unified reality. And when you let that really sink in, well, that's when everything begins to change. Think about mental health. So much of our anxiety and fear comes from this feeling that we're small, fragile, separate self that needs to be defended all the time. Realizing your true nature is boundless awareness, gives you an unshakable foundation. For ethics, the logic is undeniable. If there is no fundamental other, then compassion isn't just a nice idea, it's the most rational way to live. Harming someone else is quite literally harming a part of yourself. And for our planet, this perspective completely dissolves the illusion that nature is just a resource for us to use. It's not something out there, it is us. So I'll just leave you with this one last thought to chew on. In a world that seems more and more defined by division, by conflict, by this constant drumbeat of us versus them, what happens to that entire way of thinking if it turns out that at the deepest level of reality there is only us?